The meeting of the Community Oversight Advisory Board is now called to order. First, we'd like to hear about the details of where facilities are, etc. Mandy.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you very much for being here. I just wanted to point out that we actually have restrooms inside this room, so they're just directly there. And emergency exits are clearly labeled in the room, right there and right there. I wanted to let everyone know I usually introduce at this point Brad Taylor, who is our mental health specialist. He will be here tonight, but he had a scheduling conflict, so he'll be here in the next hour. And that's it.
Thank you, Mandy. Mandy, these got picked up with my papers. Okay. So to start off, I'm going to read the elements or what it is that the COAB is responsible for. And you can all find those on this board here, too. The COAB shall independently assess the implementation of the settlement agreement, make recommendations to the parties and the COCL on additional actions, advise the Chief of Police and the Police Commissioner on strategies to improve community relations, provide the community with information on the settlement agreement and its implementation, contribute to the development and implementation of a PPB, Community Engagement and Outreach Plan, the CEO plan, and receive public comments and concerns. Those are the charges of the COAB. And I've asked Bud this evening to read the ground rules.
Am I on?
Yes.
I am. As COAB members, we assume As COAB members, we assume responsibility for the quality of our work together during meetings, discussions, and all other communications. We agree to abide by these ground rules. Critique ideas, not people. Work towards shared understanding. Speak from personal experience without generalizing, using I statements. Speak to all with the utmost respect. Avoid crosstalk. Listen respectfully when others are speaking. Listen actively and attentively. Seek to understand. Share the air. Refrain from monopolizing discussions and encourage participation by everyone. Challenge ideas in a respectful manner. Avoid put-downs, even humorous ones, or other attacks on individuals. Ask for clarification when unsure or confused. Exit meetings in a way that is non-disrupted to the group dynamic. Recognize the legitimacy of people's feelings and support COAB members in expressing their feelings in ways appropriate to the setting. Hold one another accountable to keep agenda, times, and focus. Support the chair in managing meetings. Turn cell phones off or to vibrate and make no calls or texts during meetings except in case of emergency. During meetings, use laptops only for meeting business, note-taking, and assigned tasks. Use the parking lot for thoughts and ideas not relevant to the current conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bud. And then Amy has some news on one of our agenda items.
Good evening. I'm Amy Ruiz with the COCL team. Just wanted to provide one update on the survey agenda item. Members of the COAB received what was marked as the final survey earlier today, which we received from DHM this morning. However, in the course of the day, we discovered that there were a few errors that we believe were more Scribner's errors. It was like the number of respondents was not quite right. It was off by a few. So in the interest of getting you the absolute best survey report, we pulled it from the agenda tonight. We will get you the final as soon as that is corrected and if any other corrections need to be made. And then we'll bring it up at an upcoming meeting for discussion should folks want to ask any questions about that.
Are we pulling the entire item from the agenda or just...
The item was simply to distribute the survey at this point and just speak for just a few minutes on here's the data or here's the report. You know, it's gone through the COPS for discussion. This is what we believe to be the final version. So we'll move that ahead to a future agenda.
Okay, I would just request that when the item comes back to us, that we're prepared for a full discussion of the
This will-
entire report as
Absolutely.
opposed to how it was presented on the agenda as a snapshot.
Yes, this will allow us to do that as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Tom.
I've asked about the different survey of the PPB, the police officers, and can't seem to find it, and the COCO hasn't been able to produce it. And I think it's important to have that survey also available publicly and discussed.
And I can let Tom speak to that. I think Tom responded to your email earlier this week that that's on his to-do list to get that posted to our site shortly.
Okay.
Thanks.
With that, a major part of our evening is going to be devoted to listening to the Portland Police Bureau present information on community engagement, what it's doing, and interest in what we think it should be doing, the ways in which they do the work that they do regarding community engagement. So with that, I'm going to just move over and let Chris Uehara sit here and take over.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Chris Uehara. I am the commander at North. I'm assigned to North Precinct, and I've been with the Portland Police Bureau for a little over 25 years. Tonight, I brought a couple other folks that you see out here in uniform, and we're all going to have an opportunity to speak to everybody about the Bureau's efforts as it engages the community and what basically outreach means to us. So I'm giving it to you from our perspective as the police, and there's also going to be parts in the presentation where I'm going to want to solicit what community engagement and outreach means to all of you. Out of the 5 areas that we've been charged with as an organization to drill down and look at regarding our training, our mental health, the accountability piece, use of force, all of these pieces that the DOJ settlement agreement with the City of Portland has asked us to look at, I can honestly say that I believe that the community engagement and outreach piece is by far the most important piece of all of that. They're all important, but without the engagement with our community and having open and honest dialogue where we can learn from each other and help the Bureau be a better police bureau, my question would be, why are we even here as an organization? So I want to just instill that fact to you from me, that I just firmly believe that this is vital and important as we move forward. Some of the goals tonight, I actually have 2 big goals that I hope people will be able to take away. Number 1, to understand the overall spirit, if you would, of what the Police Bureau is doing and how we're engaging the community. And I say that because there is, I'm not sure, Mary Claire, did we pass out the other packet? Does everyone have it? Okay, so there's another pretty thick packet with about 300 plus partnerships and relationships that we have as an organization. And I'm only going to be able to scratch the very tip of the surface. And so I want you to kind of look at that again as an overarching spirit, that when we say that as a police bureau, we engage groups and we engage, we have relationships and partnerships established. Try to apply that, if you would, to the number of entities that are on your handout. And so that's why I say I want to leave you with a sense of a spirit. And then the second goal is to leave with an openness and an understanding and a willingness to explore new relationships with us and help us get there. And I think if those 2 things, if we can accomplish that tonight, and people walk away with a better understanding of the Police Bureau, and we in turn can hear from the community and understand what you want us to do, and together we can build this out. And that's why we're here. We are here to build the community engagement and outreach plan together. So with that, another thing, so I want to talk, I heard Bud talk about some of the rules of engagement. One of the things that I'm going to purposefully try to do is I'm not going to comment about past incidents, and I'm not going to, I'm going to try my best to avoid using names in the discussion, and I absolutely cannot comment on any ongoing investigations. So I hope that's clear. So with that, community engagement and outreach, again, if you follow along on the handout that I gave, 2 of the bullet points are italicized because those are both areas that we have already accomplished. The 2 on the top that are bold are the areas that we still have work to be done. So I'll let you, rather than read it to you, I'll let you just kind of follow along and look at that. What are the values of the Portland Police Bureau? Well, people ask us that all the time, and every member of our organization should know it, but out of the values, I think compassion and respect are the core pieces that we have to embody as individuals in the organization. And as I wrote on the handout, I think it's what helps people, human beings, interact with each other. And if you lack respect and you lack compassion, then you shouldn't be a police officer. And vice versa. If you, as a citizen, lack that, then it's very difficult for us to make connections with you. So I think it's just important to drive home the point that many of our folks in the organization really have a deep sense of compassion for the community that they serve. And it's a constant and an ongoing display of what they embody day in and day out, regardless of what shift they work or what assignment that they have. So when we talk about community engagement and outreach, we have to ask ourselves, what is it? And so if you follow along, again, I've got some bullet points there. One of the questions I ask myself is, as a collective group of the COAB members and maybe the community, do you feel that it's important that we come up with a definition of it and stick with that? Or do we look at the various entities of what community engagement and outreach are to us as police officers and are to you as members of the community, and do we go with that? Or do we come up with a definition? So that's kind of an open-ended question. I'm not sure how this works, if people come up and make a public comment, or if any of the COAB members make commentary at this time. How do you folks feel about that?
I think you're being asked to comment on whether or not there needs to be a definition developed by the Police Bureau, or whether there should be a definition developed maybe in conjunction with others in the Police Bureau. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
And Abel.
Well, I can remember, Commander, when we had the presentation from the training division asking the question, when is the subject of community policing introduced in the overall training that officers receive? And so as you start your conversation with us, and as I'm looking at your handout here, I'm looking for that question. What is community policing, and where does that fit in this conversation? Community policing as a philosophy,
right?
When is it introduced?
So as far as in my handout, I didn't write it because I went with community engagement and outreach as part of what would be interpreted or presented tonight as community policing. So as I say, so at this point, if we want to move along, is it that simply response to 911 calls? And is it the day-to-day? When I say day-to-day, I mean just incident, so whether it's days or afternoons or nights. Is it that interaction that takes place between police officers and citizens, and do people think that that's community engagement and that's outreach? Or is it a single contact? Is it an ongoing relationship, a deeper partnership? Is it a police-generated event? We're good at putting on events, and we put on many events. Is that considered outreach, or is it all encompassing? Is it all of the above? And is it something that's an ongoing effort every day, every afternoon shift, every night, day after day, week after week, month after month, and something that we continue to have to work on. So I didn't mean it to be more as a rhetorical question, even though it sort of maybe comes out that way, but I'm just trying to give everyone a basis for a kind of an understanding of where we come from as an organization, and it can be any and all of the above. Tom has a question. Okay, Tom.
The problem I have, and what I hear from people in the community, and when I look at statistics that reflect racial profiling, it seems like it's hard for the community to accept or buy into the notion that, particularly with people of color and African Americans, that you're seriously being productive in community engagement when the community believes that you're treating people disparately, either because of individual bias or because of practices within the police bureau. And the statistics are alarming about the disparity. And so when the community has that perception and those statistics, the trouble I have is understanding how your community outreach efforts are, I'm not saying they're not sincere, but how they're really productive, because you're countering the reality. You're trying to counter the reality of what people feel and see on the streets every day. That's the problem I have.
Okay, fair enough. And I understand where you're coming from. And can we take additional steps and learn from that and grow and get better and involve more members of the community? I think the answer is yes. And I think as you see the presentations today, or you hear the presentation, you'll see some of that effort of what we did, especially since the slide's up in the Albina and Killingsworth neighborhood in that community. That was a lift by the community and the stakeholders there with the police to, if you would, win back and take back that neighborhood and bring safety and a really a strong effort by the Bureau to help reduce crime and the fear of crime in that community. And when Sergeant Friedman does a presentation, you're going to see that. We want to take that effort and we want to put that in other neighborhoods around the city. And in fact, we are doing that. Again, a tip of the iceberg, just a snapshot of what we're doing, and a commitment that we made to the community. Not to be mistaken for a project. It's not a project. It wasn't a mission. It's a commitment, and it's an ongoing commitment by the men and women of the Police Bureau to tell the community, we're not going to let crime erode your neighborhood and take it to the depths of where you're so fearful you won't come out of your homes. And that presentation is pretty good. So I hear what you're saying, and I'm hopeful that when you see the presentation, you hear what we did, that you'll see that the effort and the sincerity of what we did is alive and true. Bud?
I think both you and Tom have actually maybe illustrated something that leads us to an answer to your question. We have a certain set of hot topics today. Racial profiling, certainly one of those. As we move forward, if we actually do our jobs right, those are going to change. We're going to fix problems and priorities are going to shift. New problems are going to pop up. So in answer to your original question, I would suggest that this list of priorities, which is how I see what you presented, needs to evolve with time. It needs to keep up with the priorities of our community as those shift and as their perceptions of policing in our city change. So to go even further on your question, I would say that there needs to be some sort of like every year or every 2 years or something like that, where we keep coming back to it and saying to the community, what are your priorities? Where do you need us to heal next?
Thank you. Any other? Rochelle?
I have a little concern about the methodology here. I think all the community outreach and engagement that you do now is wonderful, but it lays on top of some issues that have never been resolved in the community. You can talk about them in a variety of ways, the truth and reconciliation way, or other ways of just having the police apologize for old hurts that still are remembered, particularly in populations of color. And those situations, even though they haven't maybe happened for years, are passed on from generation to generation, really, stories. And I'm of the belief that you got to fix the sores underneath, not just patch on top. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike. So listening to these comments, I've talked with a few of community members, and I feel like what would make me feel safe and make me feel satisfied, and I feel like the community would agree with this, being in conversation with many of the members, that they would like to hear that their complaints are identified and that the problem is being addressed through analysis and not through putting it behind and ignoring it, but actually addressing it and really trying to solve that problem. And I really see that would be more of what we could call community engagement. Not to just help beautify the community or to make it look nice temporarily. That's good. But I think the interest lies more in how you identify the problem, what are the problems, and how you are prepared to address those and resolve those. That's all I have to say about that. Thank you.
Jimmy?
Well, I do think that we need to get together, the community, the police, and everyone else involved in the city that want to be involved, and come together with a kind of a clear, definitive definition of what community engagement outreach looks like and what it should look like, and how we should almost act accordingly, as if we'd had a mission statement, as if it is a mission statement, but it's developed by everyone involved, everyone in the total community of Portland. Now, how we do that is, I think we're going on the right track now, but I think we need to come together and to get some definitive mission statement definition of what community engagement is and what we want to do with the community engagement and outreach. And included in that should be all the truth and reconciliation kinds of things. All that should be a part of the brief definition of what community engagement should look like. And I think you were on point when you were saying, is there some definition that we can all come together with, or something we can all agree on, that this is what community engagement looks like, and we can come back. It's fluid, and it's going to be ongoing. We have to come back over and over and over, months and months and months at a time, to see if it's still working. And not only that, whatever we come up with, whatever the community comes up with, officers, all 900, all 1,000 officers will understand it and will act accordingly to that definition of what we see as community engagement, what they see as community. In other words, we want to become a cultural shift, and I think we can do that. I believe we can do that, but it's going to be some work.
Great, thank you. More questions? Okay, so moving along. I think that segues into the next bullet point, which is training opportunities. And as an organization, we have to look at community engagement and outreach and really put a lot more emphasis as we bring on new officers and or as we train the officers currently that we have in our in-service, our annual in-service training. And we have to really teach, if you would, the skill sets so that people truly embody community engagement outreach in their everyday efforts. We also have to give them the opportunity to recognize the value and even incentivize if you have to do that in order for people to truly grasp it. The job today is a lot different from the job back in the 90s or even in the early 2000s. I think the community has spoken. The community's spoken loud and clear. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here, but community has said they want a relationship with the police. They want to see the police officers out of the cars, walking again, interacting, and have an ongoing relationship rather than a one-time service my call, jump back in your call, and drive off into anonymity. So in order for that to happen, we as an organization have to really allow and support and help and teach our people to do that. And so how do you do that? It can't be assumed. A lot of the work that gets done in the organization, unfortunately, I think we've taken it for granted and assumed that everybody knows how to do that, how to engage the community, what that means, what does that look like, how are you afforded the time to get out of your car to do that. Are you going to be ostracized, or are you going to be looked at as an officer who's not taking care of your district, if you would? A lot of our police officers have specific areas that they work in, and there's calls for service that come out. And if that officer is busy spending time with a member of the community, spending time with a business, at a school, reading to kids, doing the things that the community have asked us to do, will they be ridiculed? Will they be, again, looked down upon by other members of the Bureau? That's something that we have to carefully weigh. We have to look at and balance time spent out doing proactive police work and time spent being reactive to 911 calls. So I put that bullet point in there and I throw that out because that's a reality of what we face as an organization. We're short-staffed. Does that mean that we don't do it? I don't think so. I think that means that we come up with innovative, creative ways to do it, in addition to taking the 911 calls and servicing the community. When you're not doing that, get over to the community center, meet with the kids, shoot some basketball with them, get out and about so that the young people know who we are. It's a tough balance, again, because we are limited, but we can't lean on that crutch and say, oh, we don't have enough police officers, so we can't do that. I say more, the challenge is, with the limited number of officers we have, how do we go out and do it and get it accomplished? Alicia.
Yeah. So I think there are two sort of interesting things that sort of come to mind. Is that I guess I'm trying to figure out if there's a way that police officers can sort of feed two birds with one seed, meaning even in the context of a 911 call, being able to be more compassionate and humane in the moment and modeling and demonstrating to the community that the person behind the blue suit is a human too, and understand. So on the one hand, you're protecting and serving, and you're also being human in the moment. And I think that's a tough balance, but I do believe it can be achieved. And then on the other end, what I hear you saying, that I think it's an interesting conundrum. You can come up with policies and procedures and even a coordinated bi-directional plan that includes community and get buy-in from a good majority of the officers. And you can develop a clear plan for what community policing looks like. But if you have sort of internal structural struggles, meaning, because you just said that there are some officers who have to deal with their peers saying, well, you're not doing your job or meeting expectations. So what it suggests to me is that there's subtext and there's some cultural things that we may not be privy to. But it sounds like if those subcultural aspects are not deconstructed and reconstructed, then your efforts are sort of null and void. And so then the real question becomes, in order to get to that deep work, meaning the subcultural sort of shift, that is a requisite in order for any of this work to stick. I guess I want to turn back to you all as the officers and say, what do you think you require? What do you think is required to get that seismic shift. It's not impossible. But what do you think is required? There are really good pockets of work that's being done. The problem is that not enough of your officers are doing it. But you're amazing. The people who are here today, I know a gentleman who was in D.C. honored at the White House for his work is here. I can tout off a lot of wonderful officers' work. The issue, and I don't want to say problem, the issue or the challenge is we don't have enough. And so we're fighting against sort of this invisible subcultural demon, if you will, that if we don't change it, I'm afraid that all of our good efforts will be for naught. And I don't think any of us come around this table every month to fail. So I want us to maybe be thinking about that as we have this conversation tonight as well.
Yep. So to answer your question, what we do is we take one officer at a time that wants to do the community proactive work. We champion that in the precinct. We give time and energy and support, and we reward it by even writing letters of commendation, letters of appreciation to the officer, and we present that in roll calls so that the peer officers and others see that that work is honorable work and it's supported by the command staff. And so slowly, as we do that, officer by officer, whether it's an event, a community ask, and officers go to that. So speaking for myself as a North Precinct commander, I really try to implore that upon my command staff and then the line sergeants to find the time for the officer and to support them and to continue to tell them that, yes, that's the direction that I want them to go. That's the direction that the chief has challenged us and charged us to go. Build additional relationships with the community, spend time, use non-traditional methods to get there. Do these things. That's what he wants us to do. How do you do it with the time or lack thereof? You come up with creative ways to do it. And so we at North Precinct, time and time again, in fact, Jakari is one of my officers who works on the night shift, and he can tell you that's really kind of where the push is for us to get each officer to get it, if you would. And we're not blinded by the challenge ahead of us. And I'm speaking candidly and open to you because I want you folks to understand the real challenges that we face as an organization. We're not a perfect organization, but we certainly are trying. We're trying to get there, and we're doing it one person at a time. And the effort is there, and it's alive, and it's ongoing, and we're doing that as a bureau, as a police bureau. Jakari?
Can I just, do you feel like, I'm sorry, it's a follow-up. I'm sorry if I'm out of order. Do you feel like you have every good tool to get there?
I don't know if I have every good tool because I don't know all the good tools that are out there, which is, I think, why I'm here to ask all of you to give us your support and help us. And so if you have ideas and you have tools in your toolbox, share them with us. And I would love to take that away and bring that back to the
Okay,
precinct.
put that on the record. You said it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your honesty.
Okay. So, Jakari?
So this thinking, when we're on a call and it kind of seems like it's like a welfare check, we're checking on somebody, the perception is that shouldn't take you a very long time. You have calls coming out in your district. Sometimes that could be perceived by your peers as you're just milking a call, you're just staying on it and just hanging out, then other people are having to do your work. So it's more of a mindset of, I don't want to look like I'm lazy to my peers. I have a good work ethic. I'm not going to let somebody else do my portion of my work. At the same time, like what the commander was saying, that welfare check, if I take that extra time to really see what's going on with that person, and you start seeing that there's a pattern with this person constantly having calls coming out on them, if I can take that extra time to see what's going on, what resources I can get them so that's not an issue anymore, that extra time will prevent those future calls. And so as far as I'm concerned, relaying that to officers and getting out that mindset that you got to rush, get your calls, take that time and try to not just put a Band-Aid on the issue and problem, but try to fix it. and I've been learning that, especially this year, just how important it is just to take that extra 15, 20 minutes with somebody and really see what's going on with them. And on that note too, I was talking to Bud. We really do need you guys, the community officers, when we're on the street. We need your support. We need you guys to. We need that relationship. We really do, and officers want it. But I don't think anyone became a police officer to be hated. You guys don't know how much it means to us when we're just out and someone comes up to us, and we may have came from a pretty rough call, and we're not so happy, and someone comes up to us from the community and asks us if we're okay. It really means a lot. And at our last EIS meeting, people were asking us, what are we doing to take care of ourselves, our mental health, and how are we taking, and what do we do to make ourselves feel better? And just somebody walking up and smiling at us, or I've had people come up and give me a hug, and there's been a lot of times where I needed it, and that has healed me, and I know other officers appreciate it.
Thanks. Bud?
Thank you, Jakari. I think, Jakari, you can answer this, or Commander Uehara, whichever is appropriate. So I hear you describing perhaps a culture that is almost quota-driven and measures you based on how many of perhaps the most violent, I don't know what the standard is, but most difficult calls you handle, and treats welfare checks as of lower value. So the question for you is that simply a cultural thing where that's police officers looking at each other and evaluating, are you really part of the team, or are you loafing around? Or do we actually have a system of measurements that plays into even performance evaluations where officers are being graded on something that's close to a quota system?
We don't have a quota system per se. It's more of a district integrity. So if you are a district officer, you're responsible for each and every call in that district. That's the mindset and the persona that the officer takes in with them. So if they get tied up and another adjoining district officer has to come in and take their calls and take a call and take a call while they're tied up, it weighs on them. And there's some, today you and I are working 2 districts adjoining, and I'm taking all of your calls while you're busy. Right. Tomorrow, you may return that favor back to me. So there's no quota system per se, but if somebody's always tied up doing follow-up or taking those extra steps to really connect on that service level, and the other officers nearby don't share that same value system, that's where that strife and that's where that divide takes place amongst the officers. And it's not to the point where it's destructive and awful, and I don't want to work next to this officer, but it's a feeling of somewhat guilt that the officer carries that didn't take those calls, even though they know they were doing exactly what it is that the command staff, the police bureau, is asking them to do. Serve that call, serve that citizen, and do the very, very best you can for them, because that may be the very first call that citizen ever had, or that very first contact they ever had with the police. It may be Jakari's 100th family disturbance, domestic violence call. It may be the very first time he ever responded to help that citizen in need out. And so we tell them, officers, over and over, go and serve and do the best that you can on that call. And regardless of what you may receive from your teammates, if you would, whether it's a little ribbing, kind of hey, Jakari, while you were out taking care of that, I took 4 or 5 of your calls. Like, again, keeping it real. That's the behind the scenes maybe stuff that you all don't see or don't know about, and that's the internal culture of the police bureau that we are trying to change. And again, it's going to take time for that to happen, but it's one officer at a time, it's one call at a time, and hopefully we'll get there. Senator Gordley, I know you were anxiously awaiting.
I can remember a period of time in the mid-'80s into the early '90s, Commander, when community policing / community engagement worked well, and particularly in inner northeast Portland. And the community policing approach worked because of the quality of relationships that existed between community folk and police at all levels, command on down through the ranks. And I can remember 3 things that came out of that period of time. Someone else's list might look a little different, but I remember the Community Rescue Plan, which was came out of a partnership with the Black United Front and working together with Juvenile Court, Portland Public Schools, and the Police Bureau. And it was an effort to literally rescue kids that we saw falling into gang activity. Community Rescue Plan. There was the Chiefs Forum. This was under Chief Tom Potter at the time, who appointed a forum that had the responsibility of helping to develop policy. It wasn't a group of people that sat around and told war stories, or it was a real policy-making body. And then the third piece that sticks in my mind is the Citizens Police Academy. I am a product of the first Citizens Police Academy. There must have been 30 or so of us. That photo is somewhere in my archive. So we accomplished those things, and we accomplish those things through, again, what I call a quality of rich, respectful, deep, trusting relationships. Many of the people who were involved, or some of the people who were involved in community policing efforts at that time, are still living. I see one of them in the room, Joyce Harris, and Chief Potter is still with us. Dan Noley, I think Dan Noley still lives in Oregon. What I'm getting at is, have we been intentional about creating some opportunities to revisit what worked well during that particular period of time, what worked well with the people who are still with us, who can tell us how it did work, how it worked, what we did, what we claimed as success, as we look now at how it is we want to go forward together. I mean, I can imagine a really rich conversation, including the Chief Potter and Dan Noley, and there are others in the room who would add their own voices. Ronnie Herndon is still around, Joyce most certainly, a whole host of folks who could describe what community policing looked like when it worked well, when it worked very well.
Thank you. Laquita.
Good evening, everyone. Piggybacking on what you're saying, Senator, about the community and who's in the room today, but who do we want in the room tomorrow? And we have a young man, and I'm not going to just call him out like that, but I will say hello, RJ from Roosevelt High School. because I had an opportunity earlier this year to sit down with him and some of his classmates and him share his story about his experience and his experience from where he came from and where he's at today. And to see him sitting in this this room this evening is very, it just warms my heart, because I was at Roosevelt High School earlier and I didn't get a chance to see you when you were up above, but I know that it's important that we bring these younger people in our community that are doing the work, that want to do the work, because a lot of you folks are going to retire in the next several years. So we have to pass over the torch. We have to be resources, and that's what that tool is all about, us being able to, like, as community, there's a bridge that needs to be met right there. And what I find a lot of times being in a community is that we're not having these conversations enough to say, who can we mentor, who can we work with for tomorrow, because it's a different era. We can go back on yesterday, what we need, where we're at in the presence of the moment, but what do we look at our future for tomorrow? Because this is a growing city with a lot of different energy in this city and a lot of different conversations. So I really thank RJ this evening for being here with us, because he is our future and he has a lot to say, and he taught me a lot that day at that table. So it's important that we build these relationships with community members. And I know Commander, he's here probably because of that relationship, because you were very, adamant about building with him that day. And so it's a pleasure to see that continue to keep happening. And that's what we want to see for tomorrow with our youth, being at the table, helping us with these policies that needs to be changed, because we're talking about their interactions every single day. We're still dying out here, period. We're still dying in America. We're dying in Portland. And it doesn't have to be your physical body, but it's a mental thing that's happening, because we have mental trauma that we're dealing with. And so people cannot come to the space to just get over what has been going on, because it's a continuous reminder every single day when you have to see someone getting killed by a police officer. And it doesn't have to be a police officer in Portland, but that uniform reflects so much across the board. So I just wanted to say that. And on that generational, multicultural, what that culture looks like in the Bureau, because some of you guys are taking off and we got some officers that really want to do different things, and we have to allow them and give them that space to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just add real quick. I don't mean to embarrass RJ, but he is an incredible young man, and I know that because I not only saw him stand up at a forum that took place at Roosevelt High School when things started to go sideways and people started representing themselves as students at Roosevelt, and he took the courage, the initiative to stand up and set the record straight, number one. Number two, I was at that meeting with the chief, and it was a wonderful collaboration, and RJ and I had a great conversation. I said, hey, I'll see you around sometime. Not only did I see him around one more time or two more times, but those three more times that I saw him in the community, he initiated the effort and came up to me and gave me the handshake before I could get to him. And it was wonderful. And that right there, what happened between us, to me, gave me hope and a breath of fresh air to say there's young people in our community who want to take those steps forward, not afraid to put his credentials, if you would, out there. And he's with his friends, and he's approaching me and saying, how you doing? And we're giving a handshake and a brother hug. And it's awesome. It's awesome. And as police officers, and kind of like what Jakari said, when people come up and thank us or recognize the hard work we're doing or check in on us, it really means a tremendous amount to the police officers. So I don't see that as much. I'm tied to the office a little more. But those guys that are out on the street, they really appreciate it. For time's sake, I think what I'm going to do, because we sort of have delved into real quickly, what I was going to say, when you ask police officers, how are we doing on community engagement and outreach, the general response is going to be, we're doing pretty good. We're doing this, we're doing that. That's just from the police sense. When you ask the community, they're going to say, well, we'd agree that you do good in some areas, like we heard tonight, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done in other areas. And in fact, in some areas, you folks are failing. you're falling short and you're failing. And so I wanted to put that on the record and recognize that. That was another part of my presentation. There's a lot of little sub-bullet points in there I was going to delve into. Maybe we can have another conversation later. But again, for time's sake, I've got a group of folks that I want to have come up here to talk to you so you can kind of see what all this means, and when it comes down to the actual action on the street, what the police are doing, I want them to present. So with that, I'm going to ask Sergeant Tim Sessions from our Youth Services Division to come up and give you a little bit of perspective of what we do in that realm with dealing with the youth. And I think he's bringing RJ up to talk about a project that Roosevelt High School did. So if you folks want to come up, come on up.
Good evening. I'm Tim Sessions. I'm a sergeant with the Portland Police, and I'm specifically assigned to the Youth Services Division. And part of our responsibilities is I'm over the school resource officers. And most people don't realize it, but we have 6 public school districts in the city of Portland. And also charter schools, private schools, religious schools, alternative schools, on and on. We have a lot that we are responsible for. Real briefly, our job is school resource officers. A title that we're trying to push away is school police, because there's been a definition in the past about that school police are those police officers that are assigned to the high schools and sit and wait until they're approached when a problem arises, if you will. And there's a wall that willingly or unwillingly is built between the police officers and the youth, as well as the staff at the school and the parents and the community. So one of the jobs that we've been doing is that to get that stigma away, that we are school resource officers. In other words, it's officers who interact with the students, not only a handshake, a smile, a conversation, but how many officers actually offer their time to help a student on homework? Not saying that we're the best. Is that we won't talk about my teachers. Will give you some things about even my parents. But the point is that interrelation. School resource officers have even been seen on the playground with elementary school playing kickball. Of course, one fell on the ground, ripped his pants out, and didn't do a very good job. But the point is to open those relationships up, to show them we're human beings and that we care about them, to interact with them. The other part is we have a program that we started 2 years ago that's called the Student Police Academy, much like the Citizens Academy, where we take it on the road and we actually go to the school, and the maximum amount of students that can be in the class is 60, and we have a rotational system where we divide those 60 students up into 3 areas. One is a mock crime, if you will, that is made up, and we have a homicide detective and a criminalist, which is like CSI, come out to educate the students what their jobs are, how to gather evidence, how to look to solve a crime, and they have a mock crime, and they put their skills to use, and we actually have made a video of the mock crime, if you will, and we get them to give their personal opinions based on what evidence they gathered, what happened. And then we show them the film and they learn from it. The other one is we show them about defensive tactics, action-reaction drills, why we do the things we do, why TV isn't right, as well as the movies. We just can't pull our guns out anytime we want and think that's going to solve a problem, because it doesn't. It opens up things, and how by law, we are limited what we can do, let alone our own ethics, if you will, okay? We teach the students about how we, if you will, a simple thing of putting handcuffs on, that at times it's not an easy thing, or how more important to use what we call verbal judo. In other words, our skills of being able to talk to people one-on-one. The other thing that we do is we have a golf cart, and we put these glasses on the students. We call them beer glasses. There's different levels that simulate a person being under the influence of alcohol, and we have them drive a simple course with the police officer with them that has control of the cart that can stop it, and to show them you don't want to be under the influence. And then we did a step further. We get them to have tablets and do text while they're driving, but they have to drive the course, not with the beer glasses, okay? And to show them, no, it doesn't work. It really doesn't work to do two things at once. And then the other part that we do is we supply a lunch. We cook. I know as simple as hamburgers and hot dogs are, there's two reasons for that. How much do you learn of a person one-on-one when you break bread with them? Okay, hamburgers, hot dogs, but the bun counts. And the point is, we don't want the students to leave because it's harder to bring the students back after they've left and they go someplace to eat. We keep them together, and we keep that conversation with the officers, the detectives, command staff that are there, and we even invite school staff to participate on this. And we've done this now 6 times at some of the high schools, and it has been a tremendous success. And because of that, some of the students have asked and wanted to join and be cadets with the Portland Police. Not with the intent of being a future police officer, some will, others because they like the community engagement that the cadets do. The other part is, with being school resource officers, our intent is not to arrest students. Our intent is to work with the restorative justice program so that students are accountable but learn from their mistakes and receive our support and counsel, if you will. But there are times, because the crime is that serious, that an arrest has to be made. Because if we can keep the students in school, what is our aim? What is our goal? Graduation. Because they care about themselves, they feel good, their family feels good about them, which means they're better citizens in the city of Portland, the state of Oregon, as well as the United States. That is our aim, and that's why we're called school resource officers. And some of the other things that we do is we look at the mistakes we've made. And one of them, I'll say, is when we had a young man that was being arrested and tased at Roosevelt High School. We looked at that and went, oh boy, we need to get in the front of this. We need to basically get that relation with that community, not just St. John's area, but I'm talking Roosevelt High Schools. And what we did with the school resource officers, as well as district officers that work that area, is we held a 3-part forum with the Multnomah Youth Commission, where we have youth that are part of this committee from all over the county, where we would come in and actually work with the youth and hold discussions. We would hold, ways to get to know each other. And then the last thing I want to talk about real simply is, we were invited by Roosevelt High School with their mock trial class because they had learned of a book that a high school in Seattle did, where they worked with the police, the district attorney's office, the public defender's office, animal control, on and on, as far as how do the youth in high school, how can they understand what those governmental systems are, to understand how to work with and how they're supposed to act, if you will. So they asked a bunch of us to come to Roosevelt High School for 2 different sessions, to sit down in committees, these different tables, and the students would ask us questions. And we would answer the questions, and then they would write down their perspective, our answers, and they put it together, and they published this book that's called Youth and the Law. And their intent is the publication to give it to every student at Roosevelt High School so they could read it. And 2 more editorials have been going. Editing has gone through because some mistakes were made on it, and so there's going to be another publication come out. But RJ here was one of the students that participated in this, and I've asked him to come and give his thoughts about that experience.
My name is RJ. Mic on. Hello. All right. My name is RJ. Graduated class of 2015 at Roosevelt High School. To go off the book, give you my opinion about the whole group. I feel like the group, it made a good welcoming, as in like bringing us together as a community. Because at first, when how we all like started getting more engagement with officers was started out by my friend Todd Garule. He was tased and beat by some officers local in St. John's, and that's close to my house. So we all as a school was fed up because we already know back in Missouri all the stuff that was going on. I'm from Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri, where I'm born and raised. Moved out here 3.5 years ago, and I feel like the officers out here doing the best job they can to keep it from what other places are looking like. And right now, and I see a lot of community people out here beating these officers over the head, like verbally, because they feel like they need to do this and need to do that. Got so many standards for them. Like, they need their space too. They humans too. They got families too and kids too. I'm a young father myself. I'm 19 years old. My son about to be 2 on December 13th. And everything takes time. And I see a lot of people want time, like want it to happen ASAP. They want the community to be fixed ASAP. They want everything ASAP. Well, it don't work like that. I'm from a city where you'll get killed by a cop. You'll get killed by your own parents, little kids. They don't play. That's why I'm out in Portland, Oregon to this day. I almost got my life taken. My mom almost got her life taken. Nobody helped. And I come here and I'm getting all the support. I never seen officers engage with kids in a positive way like I did moving to Portland. Never seen a day in my life. I was raised in Kansas City, Missouri for 16 years of my life. I moved here and I see these officers really pushing and making an effort to have a good community. And that actually makes me have the trust and have the love and the respect for these officers. And to go back to the group that we had last year, they was teaching us stuff about engaging with officers and the rights and what you shouldn't do as a citizen, and things to think about. Because a lot of kids our age, they don't care. They ruthless. They'll do things just because they think it's cool. They'll talk trash and try to abuse an officer or assault them because they think it's cool. And the thing is, it starts with the youth. And I feel like we can sit here all day and talk to each other about this, but if the youth not in here, it won't work. Our future won't be bright. That's just the truth. I feel like besides just having me in here on the day, like more meetings like this, I don't know if y'all have meetings like this every month or whatnot, but I feel like more youth should be in here and speaking their mind because they the ones in the streets every day. They the ones living on the streets homeless, no place to go. And like I said, moving out here to Portland, I ain't never seen officers engaged so positively. It amazes me. It makes me feel like I can raise my son in this neighborhood. And I heard about Portland and how it used to be and everything else. It's a big jump from what it used to be. That's right before I got here. And then now that, it's good to have these meetings here and to talk about things and be open and be 100% and real with each other about, because that's what we need to do. Don't sugarcoat nothing. Sugarcoating things would only make it worse when you think you're making it better. And, I'm sorry, I got a lot to say right now because, my mind going crazy. But from my experience with officers, I had bad things happen to me In Missouri, when I engage with officers and I'm getting sustained, I never got taken to jail, but I got sustained because I was accused of something, of having a pistol or the crowd that I was hanging around. I was in a SWAT kick-in when I was 9 years old. Had a gun pointed to my head. In the back room, I was sleeping. I see my sister get thrown against the wall. We was at our friend's house. They raided the wrong house, but they had to cover it up because they messed up. And they planted heroin in the house. We didn't have heroin because we had babies in the house. Nobody sold drugs. We lived in a jacked up community, and it's still jacked up to this day. I know everybody hears about the stuff that's going on in Missouri University, everything that's going on in Ferguson. That stuff is on a daily. I don't know why it's hitting the news like it never happens. It happens on a daily. That's why I'm here. There's a reason and purpose why I'm sitting here in this room to this day. And I'm speaking my mind and speaking from the heart. I hope that what I have to say, has you all thinking and be able to help change, make a change. And that's why even just young as I am, a lot of people at Roosevelt look up to me as a big brother, as a mentor, because I'm loyal to my people. And I give back to the community and to the youth because I care. No matter how young I am, got to educate one another and build one another up. So that's why I spend most of my time in Roosevelt. And then I even take my son along to some events so he can learn. He's 1.5 right now, but he's going to eventually learn once I plant that seed. That's my legacy that I'm leaving behind when I leave this earth. So I feel like we should always have open space for the youth, because I don't get I look on the media and they having all these conferences and all these meetings and everybody's saying what and what not to say and all this crap going on TV. But I'm like, where's the youth? We the ones causing all the ruckus. We the ones that's hurt too. We the future. So when everybody else get old in their 90s and 80s, we my fault. I'm sorry. But I mean, when everybody else get to them latter years, I'm sorry. I mean, the youngest is the ones that's gonna be the doctors and lawyers too, which is why I'm continuing to teach people that's my age. And just like last weekend, I was at a birthday party, and I'm sorry if this is off topic. It's not off topic, but it relates a lot to what I'm about to say. But I was at a birthday party last weekend. It was a young teenage party, and some people was in there trying to gangbang and act stupid, and you know how that goes. I shut that down real quick. I'm not allowing that to happen, because honestly, I shut it down. I ripped the phone out because they was playing YG. Anybody know about YG? Supposed to be a California blood? Nonsense. But everybody started throwing up gang signs and stuff, and I ripped the phone out the wall, and I told everybody to shut up. Because I was like, if you don't know the history of the gang that you're repping, what's the point of repping it? And I told them, do you know what gangs was really made for? Gangs was made to protect our community from the dirty authorities that's out there. I'm not saying authorities as in good and bad. I'm talking about the people, the ones that's dirty, undercover, under the sheets, But gangs really made to protect each other, and everybody's using to kill each other. Just like I was talking to one of my mentors, said FBI and the CIA and police bureau and stuff like that, that's a gang too, but it's just organized. But then these young cats out here, they twist the game up, and they don't know where to turn to, and they don't have leaders to show them the way. Because nobody want to step out and be different. Everybody want to be the same. Everybody wants to follow each other. Which is why I continue to show the love to the officers in front of my friends. Everybody know that I associate myself with officers and, people in the community that's high authority, because I want them to see that not everybody's the same. Everybody's human. So everybody just assume that every cop is dirty. Oh, F the 12, this and that. That's nonsense, man. Like these officers right here, them showing me love like they do, that's what got me that trust, because I never trusted officers because of the stuff that I was going through in Missouri. My heart was broken. I had family that was killed by officers, and it hurts me to this day. And just by them showing me that love, built that trust and that bond back. And I'm quick to go anywhere with them. Show me some, different scenery, or tell me a little bit more about, the law and, stuff like that. I'll be glad to bring my son along. That's how much trust that they got from me. And right now, moving from another state and city across the country over here, and I'm hearing people over here is having so much expectations from officers, and then expected for it to happen ASAP. It's not going to work like that. Like I said, like Laquita said, take time. But that's it.
Thank you. So for the sake of time, again, we're going to modify our presentation, and I'd like to call Sergeant Mark Friedman up to give the presentation that you see on the screen back there.
All right. Good evening. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to talk a little bit about. I've prepared a slideshow about the North Albina and Killingsworth collaboration. Just real quickly, Philip, during our introductory or some of the discussions we had earlier, the commander had asked what community outreach means to some of the community members up here, and it struck me that he said, and hopefully I'm not mischaracterizing this, but it's not about beautifying the neighborhood, and it's not just about solving problems today. It's about solving them hopefully forever, and reflecting on community concerns specifically. And I think that you'll find that this commitment that we've made, the police bureau has made in the North Albina and Killingsworth area, will show that is our goal as well, which is to solve the problems long term, not just solve them for the day or for the week or for the month. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right into this. For those of you that aren't familiar with North Albina and Killingsworth in the northeast Portland, it's the core area. This is a map that kind of demonstrates what that area looks like. So you have North Albina that runs north and south, and Killingsworth that runs east and west, and it's a very diverse mixed-use neighborhood. One of the striking features about it is it's a transit hub. It houses a public library. There are 2 high schools. One of them an alternative high school for non-traditional high school for students that haven't been successful generally in the traditional high school environment, and the other being Jefferson High School, which sits off to the east of the intersection. And then essentially the dominant feature of that neighborhood is Portland Community College. It's a Cascade campus. It serves about 22,000 students approximately every year. It's the largest community college in Portland Community College's system. So the thing that strikes you if you work in this area is that it is an educational hub. That is, it is filled with youth. There's a variety of minority-owned businesses that dot the block as you move up and down, especially on Killingsworth. And if you've been in Portland for a while, you'll know the history of this area. It's historically been known as a place that's not very safe, and the statistics that the Police Bureau has access to bears that out. These are statistics from 2010 that our crime analysts were able to put together. Shows that you were 9 times more likely to be robbed in that neighborhood. You were 3 times more likely to be the victim of a crime if you're an African American. Gun-related homicides, it is a hotspot, and it was a hotspot for gun-related homicides, not just in 2010, but historically year over year. And it was also an area that was a hotspot for attempted murders. Drive-by shootings were common in that neighborhood, as well as violent assaults. Additionally, in 2011, there's an analysis done about homicides and shootings, and again, gang activity that goes along with that was also in the city of Portland. Was consistently one of those areas where you could find that as a bright red dot on our density maps when it came to violent crime. So North Precinct, in 2011, there was a couple of very high-profile incidents which occurred in that neighborhood. In one particular instance, there were 6 high school students that were shot during a shooting outside of Jefferson High School. There was a homicide in that neighborhood, and the president of Portland Community College at that time is Dr. Algie Gatewood. He asked North Precinct to engage. He asked us to engage in a little bit different police work in that neighborhood than we had been doing for many years. Traditional law enforcement tactics were not working, and he wanted to try something new. Dr. Gatewood was the chair of the Albina Killingsworth Safe Neighborhood Commission. That was a group of stakeholders that they organized in 2006 and continued to gain momentum moving into 2010 and 2011. And it was a collaborative group of folks that were meeting on a regular basis. It consisted of school leaders, both from the high schools and from the community college, from the Office of Neighborhood Involvement, the district attorney, and the Humboldt Neighborhood Association. They were meeting every month to discuss tactics around making the community safer and how do we accomplish this. And in 2011, the precinct made a commitment to start working collaboratively with the neighborhood in a different way. Again, traditional tactics, missions, that type of police work was not working. So one of the things that the precinct did was we started having officers out engaging with the business owners, students, community members that were in that area, with the school leadership, and we started asking them, what is it that you want the police to do? So as opposed to the police coming in and thinking we had all the answers, we started engaging very intensely with the community and asking them, what do you think the police bureau should be doing? What should we be prioritizing? What are we missing here? And how do we solve some of these longstanding problems, particularly around violence? And what we found surprised us. Community members were very concerned about the high-profile incidents that were occurring, the shootings, the violent assaults, the Measure 11 Part 1 crimes. But more than that, they were concerned about the fact that a lot of the quality of life issues that were going on in that neighborhood on a day in and day out basis were not being addressed adequately by the police bureau. And in fact, the environment in that neighborhood was playing a large role in that. And so we looked at like I said, the Albina Killingsworth Safe Neighborhood Commission had been meeting for several years, and they had a historical piece of paper that they had been gathering over the years in their minutes, basically, that they had kept for every single meeting that they had had. And what we found was that, and I've highlighted some of those things on the slides up there, they were talking about some of these geographic features, the wall, the fact that there were convenience stores that were catering to street inebriates, selling malt liquor and fortified wine and drug paraphernalia to people, making that readily available to them. They were concerned that the police bureau was out in the neighborhood doing a lot of enforcement-related activity, but it wasn't solving the problem. Cascade Campus had done its own survey back in 2010 where they were looking at doing some bond improvements. And again, some of the comments that we found in that study were that people in the community felt like the Albina Killingsworth area was the worst corner in the neighborhood. People were talking about how scary that area was, how it wasn't uncommon to see 20 drug deals in a week, and that more important than that there was a feeling that the violence in the neighborhood was discouraging students from coming to the campus to receive an education. And so the areas that the community had specific concern about that contributed to these to the livability issues in the neighborhood were this area called the Wall. I put a picture of it up there so you can see it, and it's a retaining wall. It sits at Mississippi and Killingsworth. It wasn't uncommon in the summertime to see 20 or 30 or 40 people stacked on that wall that were engaged in drug dealing, street drinking, prostitution was going on there. There were recessed entryways, alcoves, if you will, that people would use in the area that also facilitated criminal activity. A lot of drug dealing and drug use was going on in these areas. There were There was a phone booth, one in particular, adjacent to the wall. It didn't work most of the time, but it was used as a hub for drug deals and drug sales. Some of the bus shelters, again, it's a transit hub. You have a ton of bus lines that service this area. The bus shelters were being misused by some of the criminal element in the neighborhood, and they were using those as cover to not only stay in there and drink when the weather was inclement, but also to engage in drug dealing. And then again, going back to the convenience stores, there was a feeling from the community members that the convenience stores were building their business on a profit model that catered specifically to street inebriates and to drug users. If any of you recognize what that glass pipe is in the middle up here, people, if I ask people what that is, almost everybody knows what it is. It's a crack pipe, right? Well, the businesses in that neighborhood would tell you, no, it isn't. It's a souvenir rose. And in fact, they sell those as a souvenir to get around our paraphernalia law in the state of Oregon. So they sell as a legitimate product, but it's really a crack pipe. And the Brillo, the chore boy that you see there, some of the stores were so bold as to not even sell you the whole pad. They'd rip a chunk of it off and sell it to you for $1. And that's some of the issues that the neighborhood was telling us they wanted the police department's help with. So the collaboration philosophy at the Albina-Killingsworth Safe Neighborhood Commission was we were going to work with the community members to identify acceptable behavior and standards of behavior for people who were in and around the North Albina and Killingsworth area. In partnership with them, our goals were to reduce Part 1 and 2 crime, to reduce the need for ongoing enforcement, to minimize the impact that the police enforcement had on youth specifically, and to improve our legitimacy with the people in the neighborhood. And then, probably most importantly, not to just come in and do this work and then leave, but to stay committed to the people in the community and the Albina-Killingsworth Safe Neighborhood Commission specifically, so that we could ensure that any progress that we made in that area, we could continue to build on year over year. So just real quick, we're going to run through this. The wall, this is what it looked like before in early 2012. This is the spring of 2012. Portland Community College made a commitment to abate that issue because it was being misused so frequently. And you can't see it very well, but there's a fence on top of that wall now. It eliminated the ability of that to be used as a convenience for folks who were engaging in criminal activity. After they completed the improvements in this area, that no longer became an area that was being misused by a criminal element in the community. The phone booth that was being used for drug transactions, it's no longer there. And that, again, was the Office of Neighborhood Involvement. Their hard work. They were able to get that removed. And in fact, I think the phone company was actually pretty glad to get it out of there because they spent more time fixing it than they did actually getting anybody to actually make phone calls from it. There's a picture of the receiver there, which is broken. The alcove, this alcove is a representative of several of them in the neighborhood. This is actually the back door to POIC. It is was an area where you had high school students at this alternative high school I talked about, which is POIC, that would come and go from this door, and it wouldn't be uncommon for them to run into people smoking crack cocaine or using or dealing drugs in the back door of the school. This is what that door looks like today, and that was done with the help of PDC and one of their street improvement grants. The bus shelters, we worked with a community to identify the shelters that were the most problematic and worked with the transit authority, TriMet. And some of those shelters you'll see now, even today, they're turned around. So they no longer provide this anonymity from people, especially even police officers driving by. They're opened up a little bit, and they still serve the purpose of providing shelter for folks, but they just even a small change like turning them around significantly reduced the amount of criminal activity that was going on inside of them. And then there were some minimal seating changes. Well, of course, we recognize that the seating inside the bus kiosks serves an ADA purpose. It's a convenience item. How do we stop people from taking those over for a whole day or hours at a time drinking? Allow people who are legitimately using the transit system to do so without having no place to sit. And so the transit authority, TriMet, installed these leaner benches, and those are there today, and they also have served effectively to mitigate some of the issues we were having. As far as the businesses that were selling fortified wine, malt liquor, we worked with our partners at OLCC, and we were able to reduce and eliminate some of the more problematic products that we were seeing most of the street inebriates consume on the street. In addition to that, the regulatory authority through OLCC allowed them to ban the paraphernalia sales. So where you could walk into any of those stores in the neighborhood and buy a crack pipe and Brillo, so you could smoke crack in this area, that was no longer an option. And again, it had a significant impact, and I'll be able to demonstrate that to you here in a minute. This is a key part of our work that was done in the neighborhood, and this is mentorship and alternatives to incarceration, and it speaks to our desire to seek to reduce the impact on youth. And so there were youth that were subject to enforcement, but similar to a lot of these desires we've heard already talked about today, especially through the SROs, how to maybe restorative justice is a better way to handle a lot of the youth offenses that we came across. And so our deputy district attorney, who was working on a 3-year burn grant, was able to work with a faith-based community, 1145, for those of you who are familiar with them. And those folks were able to serve as a mentor to a lot of the youth that entered the criminal justice system, and hopefully engage with them and allow them to see the error of their ways and give them some options and access to resources so that they wouldn't reoffend. Additionally, 1145 offered the police bureau and the community support in the form of physical presence. So 1145 made a commitment to have their members out in the community walking in the area of Albina and Killingsworth, reinforcing a lot of the community expectations around behavior and acceptable behavior in the community. And that was a tremendous help to the efforts that were occurring there as well. So just real fast, we've done a study of sort of success. What is it, how did it look for all of these changes? This is I'm glazing over quite a bit of the work that was done. There was enforcement that was part of this as well. But during the operational period, we saw a 16.1% reduction in crime in the Albina and Killingsworth neighborhood. At 1 year, you can see Part 1 crime, violent crime specifically, decreased by 70%. And then we go out 2 years, and those increases continue. We sustain those increases. Part 1 crime is still down 50%. And this is at a time, mind you, that citywide crime, and particularly Part 1 crime, is climbing. So those are fantastic crime reductions for this area. 2, our calls for service, which is important because preserving officers' time to do proactive police work is very important to us, especially given diminished resources. Our calls for service during the operational period in that neighborhood decreased by 8%. At 1 year, those calls for service in that neighborhood are down 18.9%. And then at 2 years, those calls for service are down 65%. And again, that's at a time when calls for service citywide are increasing. Part 2 crime, these are the thefts, not non-person to person, non-violent crime. The first part of the analysis, you see it increased, and that's because of the increased enforcement that went along with the efforts that were going on in the community. As we worked with the community and started to change some of the expectations around behavior, when you come out to 2 years, you're at a 65% reduction in Part 2 crime, which is really impressive. And then a lot of folks ask us about this, does that just mean you just pushed all the crime somewhere else? And we looked at that as well, and you can see that we didn't disperse crime just to a different area close by. We actually had a positive effect out to a quarter mile. So we still saw that crime reduction had an influence out a quarter mile from the center of Albina and Killingsworth. And that was something we were really mindful about. There were some other concerns about use of force and police being out there and doing a lot of enforcement. You can see that when you compare the amount of force that we were using in that area specifically, the average is on the left for several years. The year prior to beginning our collaborative efforts and making commitment in the neighborhood, it was down to 3.92%, and in 2012, in all of the cases where we were making custodies, force was used 2.9% of the time, and it's worth noting that that's 3 incidents, 2 of which are the pointing of a firearm at an individual that was In both cases, they actually were armed, not just perceived to be armed. And something else I'm really proud about is that during all of the work that was done enforcement-wise, the Police Bureau received 0 internal affairs complaints related to our enforcement-related activity out there, and there was quite a bit of it on the front end. One other area of concern the community has was how do we limit the use of arrests over time? And you can see that through the work collaboratively with the neighborhood, we started out doing a lot of enforcement in January of 2012. There were 96 arrests made as part of our efforts out there. As we moved through the year, 6 months later, you can see that we're out there in July, we didn't make a single arrest. And that is due to the collaborative efforts of not just the Police Bureau being involved in this, but the community coming together with the Police Bureau, working together, finding solutions to a lot of the issues that were contributing to the crime, explaining to the community members that are the desire for the community to change a lot of the things that had been accepted that were going on in that neighborhood over years and years was no longer going to be accepted by the community, and that if you were out there smoking marijuana or you were dealing drugs, you should expect the community to call, and you should expect the police to show up, and you should expect to get arrested and go to jail. And as we had those conversations over time, you can see that it started to have a positive influence on a lot of the behavior that was going on in that area. So moving forward, like I said, we didn't just want to come in and pat ourselves on the back 6 months and go, well, you did a great job, Police Bureau, let's just call it a day and we'll move on to something else. We've continued to be committed to the work that's going on in this area. In fact, the Police Bureau, in conjunction with the Office of Neighborhood Involvement, signed a partnership agreement in 2013, which memorializes our commitment to the area with all of the other stakeholders in that neighborhood, so that we are every month, the Albina Killingsworth Safe Neighborhood Commission gets together, a group of stakeholders that you see here and many others that are, it's open to anybody that would like to come, and we talk about what's going on in the neighborhood. And as issues come up, each one of these partners that has a stake in the neighborhood is able to jump in and address issues that arise, whatever they may be. Sometimes it doesn't have anything to do with the Police Bureau, and sometimes it does, but the fact that we're still committed and we're engaged in talking to the community about what's going on, it's an expression of community engagement and outreach, but it's not necessarily something you would think of right away when the Police Bureau talks about community engagement and outreach. This is some of the things that we're doing in the precinct to engage the community in day-to-day work. And this is one of numerous examples in North Precinct specifically where we do this type of work in an engagement and outreach type capacity. And that's what I was hoping to talk with you about. So any questions? Yes, Phil?
So there were a few pages earlier on in the presentation talking about 2011, 2010, and I'm just curious what it looks like now, 2014, 2013, and 2015. I'm just curious why that maybe was not included.
Well, I'll be honest with you. Part of this presentation was prepared as part of something that I had done earlier for a different project. So the analysis was done at our request all the way out to 2 years, specifically because we were presenting this as part of a different project. It's a very time-consuming project to ask our criminal analysis unit to cull these statistics on a yearly basis. One of the things that I find we're really fortunate with is as we've done our work in this neighborhood and we've had the improvements that we've been able to accomplish, we have our fingers, I guess, on the pulse of how we're doing in the neighborhood, what crime looks like, how comfortable the community members feel about being in their neighborhood, walking their neighborhood, interacting, what type of activity they see occurring. The major crimes, part one, crime specifically, drive-by shootings, violent crime, we don't see it. We don't see it at the level we saw it back in 2010 and 2011. And so it's never given rise, or there's never been a reason for us to go back to the crime analysis unit at this point and say, we would like you to pull the full spectrum of statistics to make sure that we're continuing to see those reductions. That being said, I would anticipate that if we were to ask them to do that, that they would be similar. We would have sustained a lot of the ground that we gained during the years that we were operational in that area.
Maria, let me say something first. I'd like to take this question and then open it up for public comments, then have the officers come back and finish the presentation, and then have the big discussion. And we have time because we took something off the agenda. But Maria.
I think it would be, is my microphone on? I think it would be worth it to go back and look at the crime in that area from even earlier, because people have been pushed out of that neighborhood. So when you're looking at crime in 2011 and 2012 and 2013, the people that go to Jefferson or that go to POIC, they've been pushed out of that neighborhood. It's a completely different community that lives there. So of course there's not going to be the same amount of crime or the same kind of crime, because it's a completely different constituency that lives in that neighborhood now. So I think it would be worth it to go back and look at how things have changed, and also maybe try implementing some of these programs a little bit further out, like around David Douglas or around, you know, like we heard that there was work going on around Roosevelt, but a little bit further out where there is a lot of things happening because people have been pushed out. So I think by a little bit of luck, maybe it looks like crime is going down because the neighborhoods have been completely gentrified. So it makes it look like crime has just went down, and it's all because of these community projects. But I'm not so convinced that that's the only reason why crime has went down, because of these partnerships with the police.
Thank you.
But I'm just saying, just look at it. I'm not saying you aren't doing a wonderful job. So I'm not trying to cut you down or anything. I just grew up in that neighborhood, so I'm just saying, check it out.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up for public comment. And public comment, you get 3 minutes to say whatever you want to say. At the end of that, this little buzzer is supposed to go off, and I'll ask you to relinquish the microphone. So is there anybody at this point who would like to make any comments, either on the presentation or something? Dan.
Good evening. I'm Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch. And, I'm finding this discussion very interesting, but we started the discussion by saying we're not going to name any names, even though we're going to have a frank discussion, and I don't think you can have a frank discussion unless we're going to be naming names. I was very glad to hear the young man say the name of Ty Garuli. I'm not sure what's happened with that case. I know the IPR was investigating the officers involved in that case, but no outcome has come of it, and that incident happened 14 months ago. So, and there's really no talk. I mean, the word accountability showed up on the screen or in the handout, but there's no real talk about the accountability issues. I mean, there was a discussion about the amount of use of force that might have gone down in this area, but there was no statistics about who was targeted for arrests in that area. And we got that paperwork, and it was 89% of the people were African American who were targeted under that program that you just saw. So, it works to tie a child to a chair when they're being unruly, but that's not necessarily the right thing to do. So the side effect of these community partnerships was increased racial profiling in a city that's 60% black to a ridiculous level and an unheard of level. 89% of the people targeted were African American in that program. We sent an email earlier today responding to the comments that were made by your chair at the last meeting. I think all of you got a copy of it. If you didn't, I have a copy with me. The bottom line is that we want to make sure that the process in this room doesn't end up reflecting the same problems we have out on the streets, where somebody's just saying, you have to do this because I want you to, because we're hearing the police themselves are interested in sitting down and saying, hey, how are we going to solve this problem together? That's how things should be working in this room too. The IPR's annual report, Independent Police Review's annual report, came out last week, and it's very thin on actual information. But once again, even though, again, we're hearing about all these efforts of outreach, rudeness was the #1 complaint against police officers for the 12th of 13 years since IPR was created. So there are obviously other work to do. There were no statistics also mentioned, by the way, for stop and frisks in general regarding the changes of how the police are policing things. I heard somebody refer to Senator Gordley, which is a term of respect. I think that the officers who are at the table as the advisors here are here because of their officers. I mean, they are human beings and they have first names, and that's great. But I think people who come to these meetings and don't know, when we refer to people by their first name when they're a police officer, you don't know that we're referring to a police officer. It's helpful for us to hear officer so-and-so, sergeant so-and-so, whatever. So I'm hoping that we can do that. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to the police. I think it's actually more of a sign of respect if we use their titles, is what I'm trying to say. I feel like the language that was spoken was very measured here, but there's other things that we need to deal with. And again, digging into the reality, and what was being hinted at is I think we need truth and reconciliation before we can solve a lot of these problems.
Thank you. I have a list here. Are you on the list? If not, I'll get you. Okay.
The thing is that
Hold on.
over there, I didn't want to interrupt the meeting and put my name on the list.
Okay, well, I'll get to you. Okay. Let's go to Brad. Where are you?
Right here.
Do you have a text from Ann?
I do.
All right.
It's nice to see all of you. Thanks for coming tonight. I'll be reading a text from Ann Brayfield. I am Ann Brayfield, concerned citizen. This COAB process gets more and more convoluted. I wonder at times, when will we get that the truth will set us free for the real work that must be done? The time, energy, and human damage involved in this convoluted, upside-down process, avoiding the truth and getting down to the real work, is disheartening beyond any words. I'm deeply saddened as I observe the walking wounded. I recommend the wisdom of Wendell Pierce in his interview with OPB's Dave Miller in Portland earlier this month. And there's a requested link to Think Out Loud to get to that if you'd like to listen to it. Thanks.
Thank you. Calais Lubin.
I'm going to apologize first because I'm going to hurt somebody's feelings. And I don't like to hurt people's feelings. But I need to say that in the year 2010, 6 persons were shot, 5 persons died. And of those persons, everyone was in a crisis. I'm happy to say that the very first person to whom I gave my research is now the chief of police. At that time when I gave him my research, I apologized with tears streaming down my face because of the pain. There is no compassion without passion. You have to care. And if you do care, you will hurt. I have felt your pain, all of you members of the COAB. I know that you're suffering, and I'm suffering with you. But I need to say something else. The second person who received my research is also in this room, and it was Amanda Fritz. And she began to work on the problem. Chief O'Day is working on the problem. It isn't solved. In fact, it recently was compounded when the medical examiner here decided to call a police homicide a suicide by cop. That set us backwards. Portland is in the international press. It's in The Guardian. So some of us are proud, some of us are simply hurting, some of us are working very, very hard. One of the things I learned recently at a conference is that Watts turned itself around because gang members went into a transformation brought about by the community. And because they went into a transformation, because the police went into a transformation brought about by the DOJ, they were able to cut their numbers down to an acceptable level, and to raise their pride in themselves and their help for one another. If Watts can turn themselves around, I think Portland can turn itself around. And once again, to those of you members of the COAB who were given so little in the way of support and foundation, and given so much work and such a grueling deadline, be aware the DOJ solves our legal problems for us if we will do it. But our community problems will remain ours. And if it means anything to any of you, I love you all.
Thank you, Clay. Ted Lubin?
I yield to anybody that needs the time.
Thank you. Paul Fishman?
No, I didn't sign up to talk.
Well, you've got little ditto marks here. Okay.
No.
Nancy?
I sure hope that people listen carefully to Clay. She's a wonderful woman. Her husband has also worked in the community all over the world to change our approach to how we live with each other. And I think this is the place where we can create that atmosphere, and we're starting to do it. But I am concerned that in all these stories from the police, there was no mention of the protection of the Constitution, which everyone in this country, we have a pretty good one. And when I hear about behavior of someone, I'm also concerned all the factors in our society that cause problems. Nobody mentions the poisons in some of these neighborhoods that are spewed because of their poor people, usually of color. And I sometimes feel when I'm in a protest and I see the police, and I wonder what goes through their minds about these conditions that create the need for protest. So I come from an era, and I wish this young man were in the room right now, because I could give him a few lessons on starting activism at the age of 20, because my friends were dying in Vietnam and killing people that really, why were we there? And we were challenged and listed by police officers, FBI, CIA, and I'm still on surveillance lists because I've associated with Black Lives Matter. I believe in the Constitution. I hope the police officers, as they engage in the community, continue to talk about the broad range of what that means to them, how the community exercises that, how we converse with each other, whether the full extent of the law means the extent of what freedom means in this society and we protect it, and not look at individuals as protesters, that's something unusual and quirky. It's an honor. I consider my life an honor. I've closed 2 nuclear plants, saved millions of lives, and I'm very proud of that. And I would really like to see a healthier atmosphere in our community, because I was at the Ty Gurule case, and I saw the sergeant who was responsible for the woman officer who brutally kneed Ty Gurule, where he could have she could have split the spleen, and the sergeant recognized that and said he would never do that, but he never stopped her. He was the authority at that situation, and he didn't stop her. And he went ahead and tasered. So it makes you wonder, what is it in these situations that a police officer, all of a sudden, things start going wrong? And now they're not held accountable. How many of these have not been held accountable? That's why we're here today. We want to solve the fact that people feel we're held accountable every day, just about. And you're talking about behavior with the young people, and they're held accountable. When are the police officers going to be accountable? This has got to be accomplished in this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Dante James.
Good evening. I appreciate the chance just to come and offer some thoughts. I've been engaged or involved in some version of this since it was a negotiation in Sam Adams' office. So I appreciate the hard work that each of you is doing and I know the expectation on you is unreasonable, and you're still doing it, so I appreciate that. I'm hesitant to speak because I know and respect so many of you sitting at this table, so if I might, I want to speak to you as an entity. Just in my view of the last few meetings that I've seen and how this has worked, I guess I would ask, challenge, beg you to remember the charge of this committee, which is to improve the lives of the community. And what I've seen and felt from you is dissension amongst yourselves and an inability to respect each other, understanding there's going to be and there has to be difficult conversations at this table. But if you're here with an agenda because you think there's no good cops, you're at the wrong table. And if you're here with an agenda because you don't think there are bad police or bad policing, you're at the wrong table. I mean, this has to be a conversation that you're all engaged in and everybody's heard, because the community is your charge and your focus. And I guess I would just suggest that that's not what I have felt, and I'm only speaking for me, although I've spoken to other people as well. And so I would ask you to be mindful of the work that you're doing, because you're only going to get one good shot at this. This is unique in the country, and you know it. And you're only going to get one good shot. And so keep in mind who the charge is that we're doing this for. And I mean, I've heard, good conversation tonight, but it hasn't been amongst each other, so I'll wait and see what happens. But I would just suggest to you that the difficult conversations have to be had, but do so without your own agenda. Do so with the agenda of the work of making the community be in a better situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dante. Okay, no other speakers?
I'm Jan Friedman. I'm with Disability Rights Oregon. I agree with certainly all the speakers who have been up here. And I haven't been to all these COAB meetings, so I'm not sure exactly how they've all gone, but I've heard a lot about some good collaborative police work and that sort of thing today. I'm hoping that members of the community also are invited to be the program for a COAB meeting, and so they can talk about how it's working for them interacting with the police, how it's different today than it was 2 years ago or 6 years ago or before there was mandatory CIT training. And I'd really like to hear from them. I'm just surprised that there's a whole meeting with, and there is public commentary time, and I appreciate that, but I just think on the agenda should be the people who have been interacting with the police and what they've been experiencing and how it's changed, if at all, because that's what we really need to find out about. That's why the US DOJ got involved, is because there was a problem. Does the problem still exist? And we need to hear from the voices of the people with disabilities who are interacting with the police. It's good to hear from the police and what they think is happening, but that is not the same thing as hearing directly from the person with the disability. So I'm just hoping that that's a planned part of the agenda, or can be part of the agenda.
Thank you. Joyce?
I want to just follow up on some of the comments that Dante made. And just to say to Lakita, I'm the elder, but I'm no ways tired. And there's a lot of us who aren't. Like wine, get aged, you get better. Anyway, I've been kind of following a lot of the discourse. And I have been somewhat disappointed, dismayed, because I know that whenever you bring a group together and when you're, forming, storming, norming, and all of that stuff, but there's a sense of urgency in your work. We have been through a lot of these conversations individually, collectively. We've seen people die. We've seen people get injured. We've seen people be afraid. And so we need to get this group to a point where you're moving forward with this work. Because even though people may not be here, they watch what you do. They hear about what you do. And I want to commend all of you, because this is hard work. It's taken up a lot of your time. And I just want to publicly thank all of you for your commitment, for your passion. But I want to see you move. Let's move this agenda. Let's talk about community policing. And I'll talk with you, because there's a lot of things about community policing that we need to look at. What does it look like? How do we know that we are engaged in community policing? You know, and I can tell you for myself, many, many years ago, coming in a room at King Neighborhood Facility and feeling like I was walking into a war zone with the police. And then we began to have conversations. And those conversations led to some understandings and working together. Now, it didn't happen with all police, I'm gonna be honest with you. But the ones that were able to see that their job would be far more effective if they had relationships with people in the community are the very ones I still have relationships with today. A.C. Modica was assigned to me when he was a pup, and I was the chair of the Vernon Neighborhood Association. He had just come into the Bureau. And every month, he would come to my neighborhood meeting, and we would talk. And then, you know, it grew into a situation where, you know, other people would talk with us. When we had the gang enforcement team back in the 80s, it was a community. And there was trust that was built. And so I'm saying to you, we can get that back. It's not going to be easy, because there have been some things that have happened that have created some schisms. But many of us in this room, outside of this room, have worked so very hard to change what's happened in this city over decades. And so you are the ones. And I want to say that even though you don't see people here, you know, we see you on TV. We follow what you do. And just know that you have our support. And once again, thank you so very much for the work that you've done and for the passion that you bring to this, because it's all about saving lives and creating new avenues of collaboration and relationships. That's all I got to say.
Thank you so much, Joyce. I'll have to see you. Why don't we take a 10-minute break? We'll come back and we'll resume we'll end the presentation and we'll have dialogue.